The solution is we all have to change so that your anxiety about a potential future which is constantly being unable, which, well, I was told when I was at school, Mrs. Struthers sat me down, told me we were going to run out of petrol in 10 years and I was going to all burn up in a boiling mass of hell. It hasn't happened. It never happens when anyone tells
here,
you.
not in the global north for us yet. It's coming, don't worry.
OK, but
something to look forward.
What do you do? What are your windows like?
What are my windows like?
Yeah, where are you living? I mean, you don't have to give me the exact location.
So if you manage to find some level of hypocrisy, you win the argument,
no, it's not about hypocrisy.
You love hypocrisy.
Okay,
you love it,
also,
don't you? Come on, you love it. Your only argument against us is hypocrisy. You go delving, find some little hypocrisy line, and then boom, we won the argument. Let's not talk about people dying this winter in cold, leaky homes because we failed on insulation on this country.
If you were genuinely concerned...
I'm a builder. I was literally doing external wall insulation today, mate. That's what I do.
No, I asked you about your own windows in your own house.
Yeah.
What are they like?
What are they like? I've just airtighted them, actually.
Brilliant. Great job.
There we go. I'm not a hypocrite, so we can have a conversation now, shall we?
I know. What I don't respond to is the sort of hectoring. I find personally, I think people find it quite difficult. So I'm encouraging, I think as we both are, we're encouraging everybody to have an honest and open debate about how we can create a cleaner, better, more progressive world.
Or warmer homes. We're not talking about warmer homes. We're talking about energy.
About chaos, catastrophe,
I'm not talking about chaos.
And death.
I'm talking about warmer homes. It's very straightforward. It's very straightforward,
Rather my dad...
I've got a hat here. I'm going to explain. You put a hat on, because we're not getting this. Put a hat on like this, and I use less energy to stay warm, whether my energy comes from eating fracked gas or renewable energy. Take the hat off, take all my clothes off, got a leaky body. I'd happily do it, just to prove the point that it's about using less energy. Then let's talk about where it comes from.
I think there's that old phrase, charity starts at home, and I think so does what you do, fair living, and we should stop doing. Final comment, please, from you, Chris.
Well, I mean, obviously we have a scientist amongst us. His knowledge of thermodynamics.
So tell us what you're going to do, and Harry, tell us how the Bad Law Project is supporting Amy.
Yeah, so I'm suing the Tavistock for, like, as you said, for racial discrimination, religious discrimination and harassment and victimisation. Since I served court documents to them, they've bullied me further. They gave a speech to all the students saying that I've committed hate speech. They've suspended me, told me that I'm unsafe to see patients. It's just been harrowing.
You do look unsafe, to be fair. I'm spooked.
Yeah, so we've served court documents and we're going to be suing them. As far as we know, this is going to be kind of a precedent-setting legal case because we've seen quite a lot of noise in America around critical race theory, but not so much here. Our politicians have been kind of openly said that teaching white privilege is wrong, we shouldn't be doing it. But there hasn't been much action and there hasn't been any legal action. And the Tavistock is an NHS trust, it's a government-funded trust. This is not just a humanities course teaching different theories. This is a clinical training to work in the NHS, and they're treating this as though it's the truth and you have to follow these ideas. So, yeah, we're going to be we're going to be testing these ideas out in court, essentially, and seeing what the Equalities Act has to say about this.
Harry?
Yeah, so the Bad Law Project, we're looking for those seminal cases where we can go in and fight. We differ from the Free Speech Union in this. If you're a member of the Free Speech Union and you get into trouble, the Free Speech Union will come and rescue you from the mouth of the monster. What the Bad Law Project will do, will go in and slay the monster. That's the difference. That's what we're looking to do, Laurence.
I love it! May the fight back begin! I am joined now down the line by LGBT activist Peter Tatchell. Peter, at what age is it acceptable for a child to come out as trans?
Well, first let me say that Mermaids is a recognised charity. The overwhelming majority of parents and trans children are happy, content and gratified by the work of Mermaids. They are happy in their trans identity, their parents are happy, they go on to lead happy, fulfilled lives. Now, to answer your question, we always have to think of the interest and welfare of the child. That must come first. And we must also listen to children. So if a child manifests a trans identity, we should not dismiss it or deny it, nor should any parent. That child should be listened to. They should have extensive discussions, which is what does happen in 99% of cases. And then only if the child is absolutely certain about a trans identity, then there should be any procedure forward in terms of chest binders, hormones, etc.
I'm sort of speechless. I don't understand. You know, if a child walked into a and came up to me and said, "I'm trans armless. I believe I shouldn't have two arms," we wouldn't chop the arm off the child, even after lots of consultation. Why are we considering trying to change, which is impossible to do anyway, the biological sex or this imagined ridiculousness of the concept of the word gender? If we wouldn't chop off a child's hand, for example, if they said, "I feel unihandism," why wouldn't you go, "Well, we'll chop off your hand then"? We wouldn't do it in any other situation. Why are we doing it irrevocably to their sexual organs that will stop them developing properly and in many cases will stop them having an orgasm later in life and have any sexual gratification whatsoever? How on earth could anyone promote this in young people ever?
But of course, chopping off an arm or a hand is irreversible, whereas chest binding and hormone therapy is not irreversible.
Lupron is used to chemically castrate sexual criminals in America. Lupron is used as a chemical castration tool. Is that correct or incorrect?
Sorry?
Lupron, the drug that they use to block puberty, is also used to chemically castrate sex offenders in America. Is that a true or untrue statement, Peter?
I do not know, but I do know that
well, it's true. I can tell you it's true.
Hormone therapies are used to the satisfaction of the vast majority of trans young people and their parents. Normally, this happens with full parental knowledge and consent. So there's no question that something is being done in 99% of cases without the parents' guidance and support. And Mermaids makes great efforts to involve parents in the procedures. They involve them in discussions and ensure that the parents are informed every step of the way.
This just feels to me like, if I had to guess, I'd say that this is voluntary thalidomide. We are mutilating children. We stand against it when it comes to sending young girls out to have their sex organs, their clitorises removed as part of FGM. But for some reason, we think in the West it's fine for to convince a little boy that he's a girl, allow him to go all the way down the path of this. So to grow long hair. I've seen this in my children's schools, and there's no get out for them when this kid would usually just turn out to be gay. Now, I and everybody else with a fair mind would turn around and say we must tolerate, love and respect trans people, but those are trans adults. Transing children is for me mutilation on the hands in the same spectrum as Mengele.
But no one is mutilating trans children. What organisations like Mermaids are trying to do is to listen to trans children, to hear their stories, to understand them, and no one under any circumstances is trying to persuade or convince them to be trans, merely to affirm what the child themselves says. I mean, I would be absolutely opposed to any attempt to try and pressure people to be trans. I don't know of any instance where Mermaids or other organisations have done that. But, what I do know is, from my own personal experience, the many stories of parents who are so happy that their child has got support from Mermaids and is now happy in their trans identity. That removes the distress, the anxiety, the depression, often the self-harm and even attempted suicide that some young trans kids go through. If we can remove that and we can give them a happy, fulfilled life, that I'm sure is something that you would want as well.
I completely agree with you. I suppose where we disagree is over the issue of identity and reality. Anyway, thank you, Peter Tatchell, very much. Do you think this is a symptom of something which, a of a deep frustration within the whole country following the last 24 months of what's been going on? Or do you think, as you say, this has been brewing? Or do you think that people are frustrated about the quality of their lives? Do you think that morale in the police is very low following the shooting of Chris Cabba and the way the media reported that? And do you think we're witnessing a sort of a storm gathering around certain issues and people stoking tensions between different communities? And what is the community relations team? You know, what can be done? So community leaders are coming together. What would be your advice to the people of to the police force?
That's a lot of loaded questions in there. So I'm going to try and break them down a little bit. No, that's not a problem at all. What I would say, the police will work with local communities. They'll work with local leaders. They'll work with the local faith sectors. They'll work with local faith officers, and then they'll also feed into what you call the National Community Detention Team, who also monitor what goes on a national level and whether there's any chance of this actually escalating across the UK. The morale in police is low. It's not because of what's happened with Chris Cabba. It's to do with a number of things. The Met Police, for example, is in special measures, as are other forces across the UK. Trust and confidence is at its lowest across most police forces. So this doesn't actually help, because what this does is people want reassurance. They want to be able to feel safe.
Tonight, it was my greatest honour to speak to the 45th President of the United States, Donald Trump. It was, as expected, an explosive interview, and I asked him what he thought of our new Prime Minister, Liz Truss, her difficult start, her economics, and I got the royalist that is President Trump on King Charles. Here's what he said. You've had, I believe, 2.1 million illegal migrants cross the border this year, and in the UK we've had 30,000, a record immigration across the Channel.
Yeah.
What advice would you give to our new Prime Minister who is having trouble to stem this flow of illegal immigration? What would you say to her?
Well, I like some of the things she's done, and she seems very nice, very good. But I like some of the things. You know, it's inverse. A lot of times finance is inverse. I cut taxes very substantially, and we did much more business. And she's done that. And I know she's taken some hits for it, which surprises me, actually. But it could be at the end of the year, you'll do bigger revenues. It's going to be very interesting. What she did is very inverse to what some people thought. But that doesn't mean they were right. I have a feeling she might be right. But I think very highly of her. And she had a great send-off from the Queen. That was the last one of the Queen's send-offs. So that was a big deal, right?
Yes, it was a truly momentous day, and it was so lovely to see the world, the eyes of the world on Britain, and Britain do such a wonderful job of saying goodbye to such a fantastic public servant. Job. What do you think?
Well, you know, my mother came from Scotland. My mother was from Scotland, Stornoway. So that's serious Scotland, right? I call that. Yep. That's deep into the heart of Scotland. That's no games, right?
Absolutely.
That's not the border. And she loved the Queen, and she loved the whole thing with the royal family. She really had great respect for the Queen and the royal family. She loved what it represented. So it's very interesting.
Can I ask you on the subject of the royalty? Prince Charles, who has been famously outspoken on this very, the green woke agenda, but the Green New Deal for England and environmentalism. What do you make of him? Do you think he's going to carry on that into his reign, or do you think he should keep his mouth closed on these issues?
Well, I think he'll be different. Now, I know him very well, quite well, and I spent a lot of time when I was over there as president with him. And with his wife, who was absolutely lovely, by the way. And we had a good time together. And so I'm a little prejudiced when I say it. But, he has a strong view on things. Probably difficult when you're the king. You want to have 100% of the people love you, like the Queen did. The Queen had everybody loved her, right? She didn't have that kind of an agenda. And yet, she was a very strong woman. I got to know her, too. She was a very strong woman, a great woman. I think Charles is going to do very well. I think he's got a great way about him. I thought he looked very good during the ceremony. Not an easy thing to do, but I think Charles is going to do very well. I think he'll probably keep it where it's politically a little bit, because he feels very strong about certain things, and not everybody agrees with that. I think he'll probably not discuss certain elements of what he believes 100%.
How do we make England great again?
Well, it's very interesting because Boris was a friend of mine, and perhaps still is. I haven't spoken to him in a while, but Boris was a friend, and I think the biggest problem Boris has is he went liberal all of a sudden. He went to the other side, and I think that was just crazy because he's a good man, but something happened to him. He changed, and he went, for the windmills all over the place, and he went for, he went a little bit wokier than I believe he really is, and I think ultimately that was the thing that really got him out. I don't believe it was the party. I think the party was just an excuse. But he's a good guy, but he changed. He was a conservative guy, and he became much less than conservative, and I think a lot of people didn't like it. They didn't like it.
I am joined tonight by the wonderful Connor Tierney, quantity surveyor by day and bare knuckle fighter by night. So, Connor, first of all, why do you want to ruin such a beautiful face? That's not me coming on to you, by the way.
Well, to be fair, I've had 8 bare knuckle fights and it's still beautiful. So that just says to me, shall I carry on ruining everyone else's face while I keep myself?
But isn't the first rule of Fight Club that you're not allowed to talk about Fight Club?
That is the first rule of Fight Club.
What's the second rule of Fight Club?
To be fair, there is no rule of Fight Club in mine. For me, it's getting the attention that I want and I deserve, in my opinion. I've been boxing for such a long time. As a kid, 48 amateur fights I had with gloves. And then going into bare knuckle because it was like, not really mainstream, but going on to TV. And that's all I wanted to do was get on TV and have a bit of fame, you know what I mean? And they say you get, is it 15 minutes of fame in your life? And I've surpassed that now. So I guess I'm on my way to stardom, and all really.
Talk me through the difference, because I was interested, I was reading about it, and the difference between landing a punch on someone's face with whatever's covered to protect.
Yeah.
It's
nothing to protect it. You're wrapped up to the about an inch before the knuckles, and that's to protect your wrist and metacarpal bones. Even though obviously, if you look there, it doesn't.
Doesn't seem to have worked. Major
But that
scarring
just depends
on
on how hard you're hitting, really. To be fair, don't it?
But what's the science on a big boxing glove versus a wrapped-up fist when it comes to what you're going to do to someone's head? Because there's a million people that would go, we need to ban all forms of fighting, full stop.
Well, this is the thing. Doctors, special consultants and stuff in hospitals, people to do with brains and head trauma will instantly say that boxing, bare knuckle, it's barbaric. It's no good for the brain. It's just as good as a football when you're heading a leather ball, isn't it? Coming full power at you, basically. But in my opinion, with bare knuckle, is safer than glove boxing, because glove boxing, right, you've got, with a fist, it's a direct impact on the bone. The bone's hitting the skull, impact, and it's an instant clean knockout. But believe it or not, there's no concussion. And I've had concussion.
Why is there no concussion?
Because the brain, obviously, there's fluid around the brain, and concussion comes when the brain is jolted or wobbled. Yeah. Especially when you're getting hit at the back of the equilibrium. So, obviously, when you're getting hit bare knuckle, the impact's solid. It's like a hammer, like a metal hammer hitting, like a metal beam.
Doesn't sound fun.
It doesn't sound fun, no. But if you imagine the effects of getting hit once and getting knocked out compared to getting hit, say, 12 rounds in a world title fight, continuously with 8-ounce gloves, some of these are, padding your hands so you can hit as hard as you want for as long as you want boxing. That's what causes concussion. Yeah, because it's that sort of... I remember when I did boxing, I'm not very good at it, as you can possibly tell by my guns, but they were always like punch through the head. With the boxing glove, like aim for the back of the head. Well, and what you're doing is you're literally trying to take someone down. Yeah. Oh, look. Oh. Thank you, Barbara. Oh, right, OK. Cheers.
We are allowed to acknowledge it.
It is a point of vodka, I think so.
It is. Anyway, go back. So you've got a bare fist. Yeah. You've got a big wrapped up fist, Rocky style. Punch. Yeah. That is going to do more damage. Is that what the science says?
So the science is, if you stand in a ring, say you give someone 5 minutes of punching them as hard as you can for as long as you want, with no damage to your hands, because your hands are wrapped and gloved. But the thing is, the spread of the blow is ridiculous. If you think an inch, so my fist there, diameter is probably about 4.5 inches. If 4.5 inches hitting your face, it's a direct impact that's going to either knock you out or it's just going to daze you. stun you, you know, but it's not going to do the effects of what a 4-inch hand gone into a glove where it spreads the blow with another 3 inches either side. You know, you're giving yourself 10 inches there wide, and you're just spreading the blow. And it's like what I always say: if you get a wooden beam and a rubber mallet, and you hit a wooden beam, it will spread the blow across the beam. But when you hit with a direct, like a metal hammer, like a claw hammer on a metal surface, it's a direct impact. And the thing is, as barbaric as it sounds with bare knuckle, there's a lot of nasty cuts and obviously broken faces and hands, but the short-term injuries, long-term injuries.
Are the fights shorter?
Yeah, they are. They're 2-minute rounds, they're 5 rounds. The company's Bare Knuckle Fighting Championship now. They've come over from America. They've introduced this huge event. We've just recently put on the biggest bare knuckle event in history, Wembley Arena, where I co-headlined with MMA star Michael Venom Page. The pair of us headlined and co-headlined the fight, and it's become a massive success. But a lot of people have watched it and thought, this is more entertaining than glove boxing.
Well, it's more real.
Yeah,
isn't
yeah,
it?
it's real.
So this is like you've got your sort of GCSEs are glove boxing.
Yeah, yeah.
A-levels are UFC.
Yeah.
And your degree in how hard you can possibly be in life is gloves off.
Yeah.
Gloves off, that's what you're saying.
Yeah,
it's an expression, isn't it?
It's gloves off, and it's not even wrapping over the knuckle either, to be fair.
It does, but look, I am looking at your knuckles, mate, and to be fair, I'm worried about what happens in your 70s.
Well, to be fair, it's, you know, the hands are never on show. As long as the face is still pretty, the hands can be as mangled as they want.
What's the most painful thing that's happened to you?
I have been knocked out. I've been knocked out in 36 seconds. It wasn't painful because I didn't remember it.
Yeah.
But when I got up, like, I think the painful part was accepting the loss more than anything. And that came with, you know, me being low and not wanting to get out of bed for a week or two, because this is a big thing for me. Passionately, I think I'm one of the best bare knuckle fighters on the planet. So
should boys be encouraged in their strength? And girls?
No. Boys and girls are welcome to do exactly what they want. You know, my son, I've got a son, he's 6 years of age. I don't want him to box. Do you know what I mean? If he wants to box, he can box. He says me he wants to, but I won't force him to go to the gym. I don't think it's a gender thing where we should be pushing the males into this combat sports and that. It all depends. It's down to you. And it's a gift as well. You need to be talented. I always had the talent. I had the knack. You see, I've seen kids get trained in the gym throughout my career who've just never had it. Just never had the talent to go forward and do anything special in their career. So, like I say, it's anything like footballers, you know, it takes them natural talents to come through, and boxing's exactly the same.
And bare knuckle boxing is the new version of it, and I can also testify to the fact that boys and girls are better and worse at it, because my niece is killer with a pair of gloves
to be fair, I'll be honest with you now, especially bare knuckle fighting championship, they have a lot of female fights. The likes of Paige Van Zandt and stuff are all involved in it now. And
should a man be able to fight a woman?
Do you know what? I've got to watch what I say because of gender equality and stuff. Well, no, you know, let's be honest, no. No, because physically, when you look at calories...
Punch a woman, man, especially without...
I'm not making it like...
No, I'm just asking you a simple question.
Yeah, no,
Should a man and a woman be able to go head-to-head?
No, of course not.
I mean, I'd lose myself.
I mean, I suppose if a woman wanted to change her gender and wanted to be a man...
What's gender?
Well, whatever they say nowadays. If she wanted to have a
she wanted to go right.
She wanted to go into and say and identify as a man, and she wanted to go into fighting and say she was, you know, injecting hormones in the body and developing the characteristics of a male.
Yeah.
And maybe, you know what I mean, maybe, but still not. Fair.
Really? What about you? So we've got no gloves on. You walk into a ring. I can understand why you're on the fence about it a bit, because you know you've got Fallon Fox and all that stuff in UFC, and I get it. But to put a woman in the most extreme combat sport there is
in the world
ever, you're really going to have to get a position on that one, my friend. I mean, you are, because you don't want to. I mean, just answer me this honestly. They walk you into the ring and they say, by the way, this is Barry.
Yeah.
Used to be Bella.
Yeah, yeah.
Would you throw a punch at her?
Him?
They?
Yeah, if she looked like a bloke, yeah, I would. If I'm getting paid to do it, then I'll do it, won't I? So.
Really?
But yeah, of course, because, you know, if she volunteered to the challenge...
But you've got weight classes in boxing, right? You've got welterweight, lightweight. She's the same weight, then fine.
Yeah, because it's a weight class, isn't it? I'm £165. which is 74 kilo. So if she stepped in at 74 kilo and she was, like you said, Bella, that went to Barry, you know, had all the physique, did the change, you know, then at the end of the day, it's a legitimate contest in my eyes. So.
Take them down, knock them out.
Exactly,
Don't rule a Fight Club. If she's called Bella, but she's now called Barry, you can knock her out. Cheers, bro.
Cheers, mate. Thank
Lovely
you.
to meet you.
And you.
And joining me is rapper, podcaster, and women's deadlift record holder, Zuby. But before I speak about him, about what he does best, I'd like to show you what he does for a living.
Oh, you don't like my style? Okay, dude. Oh, you don't like my lyrics? Okay, dude. Oh, you don't like my politics? Okay, dude. Do you even know what knowledge is? Okay, dude. Oh, now they want to mention me. Okay.
Cheers, dude.
Cheers, man. Good to see you.
How are you doing?
Blessed and highly favored as always.
So listen, I came across you after the deadlift, which was I think everyone came across you after the deadlift. But you then, I watched how you sort of built a life from what you were doing. I mean, you've been doing it all and you're always motivating other people to do it. I sense inside of you, you've been very outspoken on vaccinations, you've been very outspoken on bodily autonomy, you've been very outspoken on, not outspoken, logical and sensible about all of this stuff. Where do your principles and your views and your standpoints come from?
Man, that's always a difficult one to answer, I think, for anybody. I guess it's a combination of my personality, my upbringing, my experiences, the way my brain works and the way that I view the world. I have a really diverse background. I was born in the UK, grew up in Saudi Arabia, went to an international school there, essentially an American school for several years. Came back to the UK, went to school here for a while, went to university here. My family background's originally from Nigeria, and on top of that, I've traveled to about 38 different countries now. I spent a lot of time in the US. I've got a big audience over there. I'll be heading out to Australia soon, in fact, as well. So I just try to make sense of the world, and I'm someone who's naturally intellectually curious. So I think that my beliefs and perspectives stem from a combination of that.
Yeah, and you encourage people to get jacksinated rather than vaccinated necessarily. I really like it. So you say you went to school in Saudi Arabia. What was that like?
Yeah, sure. So I was in Saudi Arabia, where I lived was kind of like an expat bubble. So there are sort of two sides of it. If you live in a Gulf country as an expat, they have small towns. They're called camps where primarily expats live. So you've got those small little bubbles, and then outside
safe
spaces, yeah. And then outside of that, they've got the real cities. So you get to see both sides. But I lived there from the age of 1, pretty much. So that's where all my earliest memories are. I was there in school from the age of 5 up until 11. So I was in the American school system, kindergarten to 5th grade. And then essentially after 5th grade, I went to boarding school here in the UK. And I studied here for another 7 years. And then I did well in school, got into Oxford University, studied computer science there, graduated. It's also where my music career started. I released my first album when I was still studying at Oxford. And I went full-time with my music in 2011. And for the past 11 years, I have been carving a name for myself initially just through music, but then that expanded into realms of social media and social cultural commentary. Started my podcast in 2019, wrote and released my first book, Strong Advice, Zuby's Guide to Fitness for Everybody then. Had my first appearance on Joe Rogan and Tucker Carlson, Ben Shapiro, lots of big US podcasts and shows. And over the past 3.5 years, my audience and reach has just exploded all over the world.
What I really admire about you is you seem to do it single-handedly, and you will not stop at anybody else. You're not relying on anybody else to deliver. Like, I've got a thing on there that tells me what to say. But and I watch your, I don't know if you still do it because you're probably too big now, but you would do these little auctions online. You'd be going like, I've got 50 books to sell, and there's now, and they get more expensive, the less you do it. And you've essentially made a real... You're a true entrepreneur in the oldest sense of the word, and it's such an admirable thing. And where do you think that work ethic comes from? Is it a family thing? Is it a mum-dad thing? Or what are your views on the family, for example?
Man, what are my views on the family? Man, family is
we need them?
Bedrock. Family is the bedrock and cornerstone of a society. Anyone who knows me knows that I'm a big champion for individual rights and self-determination and independent thinking, independent action, critical thought. But no man is an island. We all come from a family and a long lineage, whether we like and appreciate that or not. But family is the cornerstone and bedrock of a country, of a community, a town, a city, a nation. Yes, it's made up of individuals, but that family dynamic and unit is extraordinarily important. And when it is not intact or when there are problems there, it leads to wider problems in a society and wider problems in a nation. So I'm very pro-family, which sounds like a weird sort of thing to say. I think that everyone should be pro-family. It sounds like a sort of default position. But I think that in this strange and turbulent time where everything is controversial and everything is up for debate, even very, very basic things, I think perhaps it's important to reiterate the fact that family is incredibly important. And I'm very, very blessed to come from a great family and have wonderful parents and wonderful siblings. And that's truly a blessing. I think that's the biggest privilege one can really have.
That's such a good, I believe the same. Do you think that, what do you make of the Italian elections? Are you political at all? Do you care about politics?
Yeah, it's funny because a lot of people view me through a very political lens.
Do they? What political?
A lot of people do. I'm not really into party politics per se. I'm more interested in big ideas. I'm very interested in humanity as a whole and what makes us think and behave the way that we do. It's part of why I love traveling to different cities and different countries, experiencing different cultures, talking to such a range of people, whether interviews like this or through my own podcast and other people's, because that's how we really get to learn about the world. People have all sorts of different beliefs and perspectives. We've got about 8 billion people in this world, and there's no two of them who believe the exact same thing on every issue. And I think that that is interesting. We've got such a range of personalities, experiences, talents, ways of thinking, perspectives, and I honestly think that we can all learn from each other. I think one of the biggest concerns I have with the way some things seem to be going in the West is that conversation and thinking themselves are often being discouraged. There's just a set narrative and a very narrow range of views that are considered acceptable. And anyone who goes outside of that or who questions it or challenges it or even sometimes wants to have a conversation, right? There'll be someone right now on the internet who's mad that we are sitting here talking to each other. And to me, that's insane. I think we need more conversations, not less.
Why do you think we've stopped talking to each other? Or, I don't think about it in terms of talking. I think about it in terms of listening. My mother, God rest her soul, always used to say to me, draw people out, draw people out, draw people out, find out what they think. And then from that minute that you start to engage with them lovingly, even people that don't necessarily love you back, you start to find out a bit about them. So rather than when did we stop talking to each other, when did we stop listening to each other and why and what's going to happen?
Man, I think there's a lot of factors to it. I think the internet and social media is a factor. I don't think it's all of it. I think that attention spans have shrunk down. And one thing about the internet and social media is people see one another as caricatures. When you're on Twitter or Instagram or these other platforms, it's easy to forget that there are other human beings on the other side, assuming it's not a bot that you're talking to. And when people are reduced to a tiny little avatar and a bio and a couple opinions that you can see, it actually causes conversations to happen backwards. And then with people flicking through all the time, there's just very short attention spans. And I think some of it comes down to what I'd call intellectual laziness. I think that it's difficult to view people as individuals. It's easier to just have boxes that you can put people in, and people like to have boxes and labels that they can just put on people, because once you put a label on someone, you don't need to view them as an individual anymore. You don't need to know them. You can just hear one thing they say or see one aspect about them, visible or not, and you already have your prejudgments about that box. So once you put someone in that box, whether it's, okay, I think this about liberals, I think this about conservatives, I think this about religious people, I think this about atheists, I think this about people who vote this way, people who vote that way, I think this about white people, I think this about black people. And you see oftentimes people performing this intellectual laziness, right? So rather than really it's
easier to be virtuous than to actually do something about anything.
It is. I think it's just, quicker and easier for people. I think people don't like to use their brains and use that intellectual energy more than is necessary, which is understandable to a degree because we live in a really complex world. We live in an extraordinarily complex world. Our eyes can only focus in one place at one time. We can only hear one conversation properly at one time and so on. So if you're moving around and you're seeing thousands and thousands of people all the time and you're just trying to focus on what's important, we have certain pattern recognition and heuristics, and you can navigate the world just by thinking, okay, I think this about this. It's a simplification way.
Next up, Meghan Markle has stated recently in an interview that was listened to by 9 people that she feels that movies like Austin Powers and Kill Bill present caricatures of women of Asian descent as over-sexualized or aggressive. She added that the toxic stereotyping of women in Asian descent doesn't just end once the credits roll. Does Meghan Markle have a point? Or is this just a woke, Z-list actress making a mountain out of a molehill to sell another book or make another Netflix program? To discuss this, I am joined in the studio by award-winning journalist Andy Ngo. Thank you, Andy, so much for joining us.
Of course, thanks for having me here.
Okay, talk me through this one.
So the title of the episode is The Demystification of the Dragon Lady, which sounds very philosophical and intellectual, but if you listen to just a few minutes of it, the issue that Meghan raises in so-called stereotypes in Hollywood of East Asian or Oriental women is she brings up Austin Powers. The third film in the series that came out in 2002 had a running gag from previous films, actually, where the names of 2 women in this particular case sounds like something very sexual, and the 2 women here happen to be Japanese girls. The point, I think, of that scene is that it's mocking the caricature. And now, 20 years later, Meghan thinks that she's being philosophical by raising, well, these are caricatures and it's offensive. Well, that was actually the point. And, for her, she brought on the guest of Margaret Cho to discuss the alleged hypersexualization of East Asian or Oriental women. And Margaret Cho is a Korean-American comedian who, for decades, the backbone of her public persona and her comedy is the fact that she's extremely hypersexualized and that she makes tropes about East Asian people and her Korean family. So the whole thing is typically what you expect, a lot of contradictions and I guess irony that Meghan doesn't appear to see in front of her.
She's never one to avoid jumping on a bandwagon, Meghan, is she? So do you think we're witnessing in America, which is never reported by CNN or any of the MSNBC or anything like that, systemic racial attacks on Asian people, East Asian people? Do you think Meghan is just jumping on the bandwagon of going, now I've got to try and get my Asian brothers and sisters on board? Or is she genuinely concerned?
She is jumping a bandwagon, obviously. She brought up, actually, crimes against Asian Americans at one point, but I think completely misinformed the audience. So she brought up the case of the shootings of the Asian sex balls in Atlanta in March of last year. Now, that mass shooting, in which there were 8 people who were murdered, 6 of whom were of East Asian Oriental background, the media ran with the narrative that this was an extension of anti-Asian bigotry, discrimination from COVID, from Trump's rhetoric, and it started the campaign #StopAsianHate. Well, very quickly it emerged that there was no evidence that the suspect, now convicted gunman, had actually targeted these spas because of racial animus. In fact, based on what he said and all the evidence that's been known, is that he had a sex addiction and viewed these massage parlors that also is accused of having performing illegal sex services. That's why he targeted them. And in one of the 2 counties where the prosecutors have successfully brought convictions against him, the district attorney there in Cherokee County, Georgia, did say that there was no evidence of racial animus. But even with all this known, Meghan brought this up as somehow squeezing it into this podcast discussion about anti-Asian hate or discrimination, and it doesn't fit. And what's unfortunate is that one of the other guests on our show is Lisa Ling, is a very successful Asian American journalist, and there was no pushback by this journalist on misinformation. And it's also been reported that Meghan's hired a fact checker for her podcast series, and I would just say apparently that person's not correct.
But there is, in America, there is quite a rising tide, if you look at the statistics, of demographic versus demographic of the attacks on Asian people. Do you think that some of this is her way of deflecting away from something that is statistically extremely relevant, as into which demographic is attacking the Asian community?
Yeah, so I can appreciate that this is a British audience who's watching, but actually even Americans aren't really aware of this because of the shying away in the mainstream media of reporting actually on demographics behind many of the perpetrators of violent attacks on East Asians in American cities. It is over and over, and we're seeing this reflected in the data as well, that we're not seeing white supremacists carrying out these attacks. In fact, the perpetrators are disproportionately Black American, and that may be very uncomfortable for people to accept, but it is a reality, and we are doing a very big disservice to the victims of these assaults, robberies, beatings, etc., by not sharing their stories in the news because of the fact of this fear that it may enforce racial stereotypes. We just had out of Northern California a man, a Black male suspect, who's been charged over allegedly beating and robbing 14 Indian Hindu women in Northern California, robbing them of their jewelry. I think if the suspect had been white, this would be one of the biggest stories in America, given the string of attacks. But most Americans are probably aren't aware that it happened once, much less 14 times.
They need to unplug from the propaganda machine and get with the stats. Andy Ngo, thank you so much for joining me.